In May 1963, NASA astronaut Gordon Cooper was admiring a beautiful view of Earth from orbit, and suddenly a mysterious green sphere appeared from the dark depths of space and approached his spaceship. It stayed with Cooper for a couple of minutes and then disappeared without a trace. What the heck was that? When the astronaut returned to Earth, reporters were strongly warned not to ask any questions about the case, and that only fueled interest. What did he see? In this video, you'll find out what inexplicable things did astronauts capture on camera, who knocks on the outer shell of their spacecraft, and how can we explain all that crazy weird stuff that humans occasionally encounter in space. The first version scientists come up with to explain all astronaut reports mentioning any oddity is hallucinations. After the Apollo 11 mission, frightening recollections from the first human to step on the moon, Neil Armstrong, leaked to the press. He allegedly informed the Mission Control Center about giant spaceships that greeted him on the moon's surface. Although after returning to Earth, Armstrong never commented on these words, and astronomers never detected anything suspicious there. It's entirely possible that the famous astronaut was embarrassed to admit that he had simply experienced typical hallucinations caused by the stress. Even the most well-trained people can suffer from them. And don't forget that Armstrong was the main hero of the entire lunar landing mission, followed by the whole world. But even when spaceflights had become routine, weird things didn't stop happening. In 1981, Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Kovalenko made his third flight to orbit and spent 2 months at the Salyut 6 space station. During this period, in the break between physical exercises he was doing, Kovalenko once saw something unbelievable in the porthole. An immense golden ellipsoid that suddenly flashed the next moment. A second flare soon followed, and then the mysterious object fell apart into 2 golden spheres shrouded in white smoke. But when the station entered the Earth's shadow, the vision faded away. At first, scientists on Earth clung to the idea that since Kovalenko had been doing exercises before he saw the strange thing, and since the station was pretty tiny, he could be short of air. Oxygen starvation sometimes induces very vivid hallucinations. The problem was that Kovalenko wasn't alone on that mission, and his partners saw the golden spheres too. Moreover, right at the moment when the described flares occurred, ground stations detected a burst of radiation in orbit. And even though Gordon Cooper was watching his green spheres from a small capsule called Mercury, the sensors monitoring his body didn't record hypoxia or stress-induced elevated heart rate. At the same time, NASA's Australian tracking station confirmed that there indeed was an unidentified object that flew right past his capsule. If neither Kovalenko nor Cooper hallucinated, only one rational explanation remains. What if astronauts see real physical objects of one common origin? In the mid-60s, spaceman James McDivitt looked out the porthole of his Gemini 4 ship and noticed a certain object that he later described as beer cans with little things like pencils sticking out of them. What those objects really were remained a mystery until NASA experts showed McDivitt this image. It depicted reflections of bolts in the multi-paned windows. The astronaut had to accept that he had been tricked by ordinary space junk. And he wasn't the only victim of such a prank. In 2013, the crew of the International Space Station filmed one curious golden object drifting nearby. Where could it come from? As it turned out, that was a piece of the space station itself, looking very similar to a Zvezda service module's antenna. Quite recently, when watching a video from the ISS, conspiracy theorists noticed these objects and immediately dubbed them extraterrestrial. Although, in fact, they are extraintestinal. Well, these are nothing more than astronauts' dried up solid waste that's regularly disposed of in space. Ew. Decades of space travel turned the near-Earth orbit into a space junk dump. Actually, astronauts can run into even dogs since the first participants selected for animal testing are still there in the skies. Although in those days, when Gordon Cooper traveled to space, human junk in orbit was extremely rare. This means that the green sphere could hardly be spacecraft debris drifting nearby. But what if space itself can produce astonishing phenomena that can never be seen on Earth? Many mysterious things occurring in orbit can be explained using poorly studied space physics. Let's take a chance. In 2003, Chinese astronaut Lang Yiwei was enjoying his solitude aboard Shenzhou 5 spacecraft when suddenly he heard someone knocking from the outside. Li Wei even looked out the porthole to find the sound source that resembled a wooden stick banging against a bucket. But there can't be any sounds in airless space, right? Scientists on Earth concluded that Li Wei had an auditory hallucination after spending too much time alone, and we could agree with them if there were no other Chinese astronauts who heard identical sounds at least twice over the following years. So, what was that? A collective illusion or some unknown effect? Speaking of unknown effects, you can easily experience one of them if you simply shut your eyes tight aboard a spaceship. Apollo astronauts thought they were going insane when they started seeing flashes each time they closed their eyes. However, this phenomenon that can never occur on Earth turned out to be so real and widespread that it was named astronaut's eye. It took scientists years to understand that these flashes are caused by cosmic rays bombarding the human retina with charged particles, even when eyelids are completely closed. But what if the lights in the eyes can dance? In 1962, astronaut John Glenn reported to Mission Control about a swarm of fireflies. Even NASA's brightest minds spent a lot of time wondering what he saw through the porthole until they finally realized it was something very familiar to regular people. It just looks very unusual in space. Glenn's fireflies actually were condensation droplets that appeared as a result of temperature differences outside the ship, and in the end, they fell off the spacecraft's hull. Consequently, this discovery helped to establish what those strange sounds heard by Chinese astronauts actually were. The point is that apart from temperature differences, spaceships have to constantly deal with pressure drops. Because of that, their hulls often get deformed. Since there's air inside, it produces sounds similar to door knocking. And yet, even eyebrow-raising physics of space can't explain all the weird things happening in orbit. In 2020, a camera mounted on the ISS captured the northern lights and perplexing glowing dots in front of our planet. Some people assume that they were elusive ball lightning, but they're wrong because this phenomenon definitely can't occur in outer space. Could it be that these dots and Gordon Cooper's spheres are the evidence of the most unbelievable thing of all? I'm afraid there's no way we can avoid this question. What if astronauts in orbit see traces of extraterrestrial forms of life? Although scientists never take this version seriously, it's hard to explain some incidents otherwise. In 1991, Soviet cosmonaut Musa Manarov was lucky to have turned on the camera in the right place at the right time. When he was recording the capsule docking with the Mir space station, a strange cylindrical object accidentally got into the frame. At first, Manarov thought it was a spent rocket stage or some other kind of space junk. However, an object like that would have swept past him along in its own orbit or fallen to Earth while that piece was just floating around. What's more, Manarov set the maximum zoom level on his camera, which means that compared to the largest International Space Station, the mysterious cylinder can look like this, several times bigger. What the heck? In 2005, the International Space Station commander Leroy Chiao was working in outer space when he looked at Earth and saw several bright objects. They were moving in a formation that looked like an upside-down check mark. But they couldn't be planes, no doubt about that. Otherwise, each of them should have been equipped with a powerful searchlight to be seen from orbit, which is technically impossible. This reminds me of Cooper's sphere and those weird dots that showed up together with the northern lights. Scientists still can't give a clear explanation for the Chiao incident, but the craziest story on my list happened to veteran astronaut Story Musgrave, the only human in history who flew on all 5 space shuttle orbiters. Musgrave claims to have seen eel-like tubes swim through space in at least 2 of his flights. Those objects weren't drifting the way hoses detached from the ship would. Instead, they were actively moving. According to the astronaut's personal opinion, that NASA prefers not to comment on, those eels could be sent by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. What if he's right? Can there really be a cylinder-shaped automatic station run by aliens and usually invisible to us? They occasionally send flotillas of probes to collect information about the human race, and when something on the probes breaks down, the small eel-like robots carry our repairs. So maybe Gordon Cooper's green sphere was a hello signal transmitted to welcome the first humans in space. For the rest of his life, Cooper was sure that he had seen something non-terrestrial and dreamed about getting in touch with another life form. But if all of that is true, why do aliens watch us? In the meantime, in 2022, NASA experts joined the study of an unidentified aerial phenomena that American military pilots keep seeing on their radars. Don't you think NASA already has a theory that goes much further than any overactive imagination?